Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:06 and it's Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in to O'Connor and Company. I just tried to make Wednesday sound as exciting as possible. Wednesday! It's Wednesday. It's no big deal. Coming up at 6:35, Cal Thomas will be our guest. 7:05, Mike Gonzalez from Heritage Foundation. The White House has a plan, and in fact, a total strategy to defund NPR and PBS, and I think it's going to happen. He's going to explain. It's all about this thing called rescission requests, which is very rare. I'm thinking Stephen Miller came up with this plan. Anyway, we'll tell you all about it. Then at 7:35, Chuck Thies, the D.C. political analyst, apparently D.C. has now figured out that, hey, we don't have to live in a city that looks like a gang war zone. We can clean up the graffiti. We can clean up the streets. We can fill potholes. We can actually act like a grown-up city. What changed with D.C.? We'll talk all about it. And then at 8:35, Will Chamberlain, senior counsel at the Article 3 Project. He's an attorney. He's an investigator. And he actually has been looking at the public records with regard to the Maryland man. You know, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the most celebrated person in the Western Hemisphere. That would be the MS-13 gang member who is now down at the prison in El Salvador. Will Chamberlain actually has all the truth, all the facts about it. He's done the research. He's got the paper trail, the public records. It's something that any journalist in America could uncover. Any Democrat senator could uncover the truth about this person, but they don't wish to. Will Chamberlain did, and he's going to lay out all of those details for you at 8:35. We might lay them out before that as a preview. It's Larry O'Connor. That was a really long introduction to this show, but I'm excited about all our guests, so I want to take some time there. Julie Gunlock, but please, I'm out of breath. Help me out. How are you? Good morning.
Well, your enthusiasm for Wednesday, it sounded a little, maybe you're just inspired by Gayle King talking about her, 11-minute roller coaster ride. Just making everything seem a little more than it actually was. So,
first of all, young lady, I am always inspired by Gayle King. Any woman
who among us
who can turn being Oprah's gal pal and allegedly side hustle with Stedman, turning that into a network career. That's always going to get my inspiration going. Yes, it is. It's Wednesday. And let's talk about these rescissions. Now, when you worked on CAP, I love tapping into your knowledge as a longtime Hill staffer before becoming part of the think tank
I like
mafia.
that you say a longtime Hill staffer rather than a Hill staffer a long time ago, which is sort of how I think about it. But go on.
That's right. That would be
so
wrong.
Old.
Rescission requests. Everyone knows, first of all, everyone knows that Congress is in charge of the purse strings. I love that they use the term purse strings when even people who carry purses, like, women and, well, a good percentage of men now, those purses rarely have strings. But the idea of purse strings goes all the way back to the 19th century and 18th century when men carried purses and they had little strings around them. Congress has the purse strings. They get to spend the money. The White House proposes a budget. They can make requests for money. We know how that works. We don't hear very often about a rescission request, and that is when the White House goes back to Congress and says, you've given us too much money, and we do not wish or plan to spend it. Mm-hmm. So we would request that you rescind this money. Not many people hear about that because it's pretty much never, ever done.
The framers were so smart. They were so smart in building these things in. It's like they knew. Mm-hmm. I honestly, sometimes I wonder if the framers had a time machine and knew the shenanigans that our politicians would get up to, because they, obviously this provision was put in to give Congress ultimately the power over an executive that's gotten out of control, or an organization that's funded that has gotten out of control. This is a beautiful thing. So look, rarely used, not illegal, not unconstitutional to use it.
And even better, everyone's and the reason these rescission requests are going to affect a lot of different agencies, but most specifically NPR and PBS. This is the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. $9.3 billion is the total rescission package. We'll get into some of the details in a moment, but what happens here is, as you know, is that, yes, it's time to defund NPR, defund PBS. And it's like, okay, well, then that'll have to go through the House, and then it'll go through the Senate. Oh, and you need 60 votes in the Senate for the filibuster, and that'll never happen. So, sorry, you're going to get stuck with NPR and PBS. Oh, no, hold your horses. Rescission requests only require a simple majority in the Senate. All you need is 50, really, because J.D. Vance can come in and break the tie. So if Mitch McConnell and Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski really want to keep funding NPR, they can go ahead and vote against this, and J.D. Vance will make it happen as the 51st vote. $9.3 billion already approved, already budgeted, already sent over to the executive branch, and the executive branch is going to come back and say, no, we don't want this $9.3 billion. What I can't wait to hear the Republicans in the House and the Senate who are going to say, no, spend that money. I demand you spend that money, and it's all going to PBS, NPR, and foreign aid initiatives under the former USAID umbrella, which, of course, we know where that money was going. And I don't see how any Republican can vote against this, Julie. This is a brilliant political move, and it's a way to get what you want done without waiting for Congress to do it.
And also, this is sort of red meat to your base, right? This is low-hanging fruit. Like, do this stuff, right? Show that you are willing to do something Republicans have been asking for. I mean, when I came to Washington 30 years ago, people were talking about this,
about defunding PBS. Yeah.
Yes. Disable this propaganda arm. Disable it. There is no reason. It is so galling. There's so many things that taxpayers pay for that go against their principles, against their beliefs. Just disband this propaganda tool by the left.
Yeah, According to Politico, the proposal will be part of a broader rescission package, a formal request to Congress to rescind previously approved funds that would also eliminate billions allocated to foreign aid. The process is established under law, which gives the House and Senate 45 days to vote to approve the request after it's submitted. The White House plans to submit the rescission request in the coming weeks. Now, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is forward-funded 2 years in advance.
Oh.
Now, apparently this was set up to insulate it from political maneuvering. And a sizable chunk of the money for 2025 has already been paid out to public broadcasters in the United States. Boy, it's amazing, again, knowing that they're in the business of radio broadcasting and television broadcasting. Imagine if we were fully funded 2 years in advance here at our company.
I also just
and
love
here's all your funding for the next 2 years.
Yeah, and I love that they're insulated from political maneuvering. Like, who insulates me against their political maneuvering?
Thank you. No one should be insulated. The military is not insulated from political maneuvering, but NPR figured out a way. Mike Gonzalez of Heritage Foundation is quoted in this Politico article saying the bottom line is NPR and PBS only have themselves to blame.
Yep.
For the last 50 years, every Republican president has tried to defund them or reform them. And, of course, they've resisted it by saying you're going to kill Big Bird. That doesn't work anymore because Big Bird has a huge multi-million-dollar contract with HBO Time Warner. And now the latest attempt to save NPR had their CEO going up under oath and lying to Congress. So Mike Gonzalez is right. They only have themselves to blame.
Really quickly, can we also say
nope. Can't wait. Hold on. Mike Gonzalez will join us at 7:05, but it's 5:15.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
All right. So you were saying, Julie, about the NPR and PBS rescission
I was just gonna say that, when is the last parent? I've been a parent for a while. I've been in parent groups. I have never in my life as a parent heard anyone talk about Big Bird. Like their children's love of Big Bird. Can we just give that up? Can we just stop?
Yeah, the killing Big Bird thing doesn't work anymore. It's funny. Well, I'll go ahead and say it. I received a direct message a couple of weeks ago from a former colleague, someone who works in the broadcasting business here in Washington, D.C., who said to me, I was going to unfollow you on this social media platform, but because I've been blocking people who seem to take glee and celebrate federal workers losing their jobs. And it was shocking to me, actually, to hear that, because I think some of my colleagues are taking glee in it. And I think I've been actually somewhat circumspect about it, knowing that a lot of our listeners here in the Washington area are losing their jobs. But although the vast, vast, vast majority of people who have lost their jobs actually have been probationary employees, they've only been on the job for about a year. So it's a relatively new job. But I don't think we've been taking glee in all of that. But it sort of bothered me, actually, that people heard that in my voice, given the fact that I think that I've gone out of my way to not sort of be like your stereotypical, screw them all kind of position. But I would like to say this. If you work at NPR and you're in danger of losing your job now because federal funding's being cut, I'll be honest with you, I do take glee in that. I am happy about that. I absolutely am happy about that. And I do have former colleagues, people who have worked at this radio station who, over the course of the years, have picked up a job at the local NPR station. And the fact of the matter is that radio station over there is a direct competitor to us.
That's right.
They like to pretend that they're nonprofit. No. They actually take money from the same people who advertise on this radio station. That makes them a competitor. And how are we judged? What is the basis of our performance? How do people say whether you're doing good on the job or not? Two ways: whether you're making money through advertisers, and I have to compete with those nonprofit people who are getting federal funding to compete against me in the same business. What the hell is that all about? And number two, ratings, listeners. And guess what? We got to compete with them for listeners as well. And they're subsidized. Do you know how big their staffs are? Because they don't have to worry about market conditions. Do you know what's happening to the radio business outside of the friendly confines of federal funding and the protections that NPR has 2 years out? They're funded by the federal government? Yeah. No, if you're working at NPR right now, even if you're a friend of mine, even if I've worked with you in the past, and you have not had to deal with the same horrific market conditions the rest of the radio industry has had to endure over the years, let me tell you something. A whole lot more friends of mine have lost their jobs in commercial radio that does not get tax subsidized than you've ever had to experience. So if somebody is in the threat of losing their job right now at NPR and you're a friend of mine, I'm sorry, but you have not been living in the real world. And I am happy that my money out of my pocket doesn't have to go to support my competitor anymore. There, I'm sorry. I just needed to get that off.
No, and for anybody who isn't aware, if you've ever, I've been a guest on NPR. I don't know if you've been a guest on NPR, Larry, but their office is downtown. I mean, swank. They own an entire building downtown DC. Right?
Oh yes.
And you mentioned the staff. It is astonishing, and I will tell you, I don't think people like us would be that upset if NPR was more balanced. Look, I still don't think there is. I mean, I always say this. I have 700 channels on my cable, on my television. I don't need NPR. That is just a fact. But none of us would be this upset or this exercised if NPR didn't spread lies about the Republican Party, about conservatives in general, about the state of the country. Because of that, they are liars. They are taxpayer-funded liars. And that is why we are so exercised about this issue.
You know what? Thank you. That's one other item. Again, if I have friends, past work associates who have worked at NPR, and you're upset about the problem with the funding, let me tell you something. During the 2020 presidential election, your organization, your news organization, willfully ignored the Hunter Biden laptop story.
That's right. That's right.
And you bragged about it. You made a public announcement morally preening about how proud you were of your organization because you refused to cover what is arguably the most important news story of that campaign. And now I'm supposed to show sympathy for you and your organization, and I'm supposed to rent my clothing because maybe you now have to compete in the real world and some people might get fired. Like, I don't know, 70% of the commercial radio industry has had to endure for the last couple of decades. Yeah, sorry. You're not in the radio business. You're not in the news business. You're in the propaganda business. And I don't know, I kind of like free speech. I kind of like news. I kind of like broadcasting. We don't propagandize here. Maybe you should change your business model. Mike Gonzalez is going to join us at 7:05 to talk about the defunding efforts for NPR and PBS and how this Trump administration rescission package is going to make it happen, finally. It's 5:23.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:36, and I'm still excited that it's Wednesday. Thanks for joining us. At 6:35, Cal Thomas will be here. 7:05, Mike Gonzalez of Heritage talk about that rescission order we just touched on. At 7:35, Chuck Dees, D.C. political analyst, tell you why you're seeing a cleaner D.C. than you used to. And then at 8:35, Will Chamberlain talk about this Maryland man, give you the truth about the Maryland man. I'm now calling him Maryland man just out of spite. The MS-13 gang member who has been deported to his country of origin. Chuck, Will Chamberlain's been doing a deep dive on that, and we'll get into all of that coming up a little later in the program. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Did you mention Harvard, Julie?
I did.
You said Harvard.
Harvard.
Harvard. And so before we get into this, let's just, again, we always want to lead with facts around here. And then we can give our opinion. Unlike our competitors down the street at NPR. Harvard has a $53 billion endowment. I don't think people know what an endowment is. An endowment is
like an entitlement.
Like your it's your savings account. It's your rainy day fund. It's your money. It's basically your nest egg. Imagine you're having to go through your daily or monthly budget or your annual budget with your husband or wife, and you got your income that you're going to get from your jobs, and your expenses, and if you have a rough year or a rough month, you've got to dip into your savings. Harvard is sitting on a $53 billion endowment of money that was given to them, gifted to them by wealthy donors that they sit on. Meanwhile, they charge their students, last I checked, and it was a while ago, my daughter was waitlisted at Harvard. She didn't get accepted to Harvard because she's Asian American. That's a whole other story, because let's not forget, Harvard is the tip of the spear when it comes to discriminating against people based on their race. They actually fought at the Supreme Court for the right to discriminate against Asian students because they were too smart. Harvard,
that's
the
commitment.
time, so that was 8 years ago. Harvard was $70,000 a year for
Good God.
tuition. That doesn't include room and board in Cambridge. That's just the tuition costs. And the Trump administration has made a simple proposal to Harvard University. They've said, hey, you get a couple of billions of dollars a year from the federal government for research, for projects, for whatever. If you want to keep that money flowing, you need to promise not to discriminate against Jewish students. You need to promise to actually enforce the law if you've got illegal protests going on, damaging your campus, especially if those protests are funded by foreign entities linked with terrorist organizations. And, oh, by the way, we'd like to see some diversity in your staffing protocols, because it looks to me like you're overloaded with left-wing, liberal, socialist professors, and there should be some fair and balanced opinions in certain schools at Harvard. So if you can do that, you can keep your funding. And, well, that's not good enough for them. They are now protesting. They are trying to sue the Trump administration against their demands. And I don't think this is going to end well for them, Julie.
Well,
but this is the fight they've decided to engage in.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that Harvard University is they're being very smug. They're saying, there's what cracks me up is this is a college which for decades has tried to tear down the United States and has attacked all of the United States sort of norms and institutions, its constitution. And now they're standing sort of on that constitution saying that private universities can teach. They actually said in a statement, no government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. The interesting thing about that statement is that they said no private university. They actually identify themselves as a private university. You're not a private university. Now, I know you're officially a private institution, but when you take billions in taxpayer dollars, you're no longer private. This is where the strings attached kind of comment that you opened the show with comes in.
Thank you.
I just, you're going to have some strings attached. Don't be a child. Understand that this is how things work.
I love that Harvard, and by the way, one of their famous alums, Barack Obama, has come out in favor of Harvard, drawing a line in the stand and protesting this. I love this newfound religion they've got on independent free thought and educational independence free from federal strings. I'm sorry, are you going to join us in saying that public schools in this country shouldn't have to, follow gender ideology rules that the federal government adds to the funding of those schools?
But Larry, also, these endowments are also made up of people give their homes or give their land or give, their libraries. They give so some of this is private money that goes into this endowment. And those people, what's so interesting about the endowments is if you dig down into these, there are endowments that I will give you this money, Harvard, but it all has to be used for tennis. Right. So you have some billionaire tennis enthusiast. He kicks the bucket. He leaves an endowment to Harvard, but it all has to be used. They might desperately need books in this one area, but they can't use it. They have to use it for tennis. That's strings attached.
Yesterday, Caroline Leavitt spoke of this yesterday at the press briefing. Cut one.
Tax-exempt status. A follow-up on Harvard, the president floated on Truth Social, I believe, the possibility of removing tax-exempt status. How serious is that threat?
When it comes to Harvard, as I said, the president has been quite clear. They must follow federal law. He also wants to see Harvard apologize, and Harvard should apologize for the egregious anti-Semitism that took place on their college campus against Jewish American students. There were professors.
That's right. They've never apologized for that. You'll remember their president denying that it ever even happened under oath. Then it was discovered that their president had plagiarized a ton of her papers to get her degrees. She's now been removed, although she's still getting her salary. Harvard is a mess. They protested on social media saying no government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach. The best response came from the Harvard Jewish Alumni Alliance. They replied to that on X and said, Harvard's fighting the Trump administration harder than it's ever fought anti-Semitism.
That's right.
Thank you.
Right.
It's 5:43.
Mark Levin, weekdays 6 till 9 on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
The Trump administration, along with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, have a modest proposal. They believe that if you are in this country as a student from a foreign nation and you are allowed in due to the good graces and generosity of the American people to be in this country as under a student visa, that while you're here, you should not participate in any kind of activities and protests that undermine the national security of this nation and of her allies. By the way, that modest proposal that Trump and Rubio and Noem have proposed is nothing new. In fact, if you look at the language involved in obtaining a student visa and agreeing to be in the United States of America due to the good graces and generosity of the American taxpayers, it's already written in that you must adhere to certain standards while in this country as a guest, as a student. And you cannot undermine law and order and the policies of the United States of America. It's not a new concept.
It's also common sense.
And so now, suddenly, the Trump administration is under fire for, in fact, enforcing that language. The latest has been the revocation of 15 student visas for George Mason University students right here in our backyard. These are students that participated in pro-Hamas protests on campus. And there may be those saying, well, that's not fair. They're just exercising their right to free speech. And if you're an American citizen, you can participate in those protests. But you're right. It's not fair. People who are here from a foreign country, who are here on a student visa, don't play by the same rules as American citizens. You're absolutely correct. It's not fair. But these are the rules, and they're the rules that they agreed to when they came into this country. If they hadn't signed that document saying, absolutely, I'll follow these rules, they wouldn't have gotten their student visa. So they either lied when they came in, which means they're subject to automatic deportation, or they violated the rules that they promised they would file, which means they're subject to automatic deportation. I don't see what the controversy is here.
I also, this idea that America should sort of entertain these people who come into our country and then, try to destroy it. Show me one country on God's green earth that would accommodate these people. You go overseas and you do this kind of stuff, you're not staying. Again, no. Americans are so generous. They are so patient. They allow this crap constantly. No other nation would allow this. You'd be deported instantly. You really would.
Because we're the beacon of freedom on the planet, and therefore we need to allow foreigners to come in and use our freedom and our liberties as a weapon to destroy us. We should just let them set our houses on fire.
What is wrong with us?
Exactly. Here's the scenario. So let's say you're an Egyptian student, right, or an Algerian student. And by the way, most of these students are in their 30s. Have you noticed that?
I know.
They're all young men in their 30s, and they look like they've been in the military for their country of origin forever, right? All right, so let's say you're an Egyptian citizen, and you come to D.C., and you get a student visa, and you go to George Washington University, which, by the way, $80,000 a year. So you're doing well there in Egypt. Well done you. So you're going to George Washington University in D.C., you're an Egyptian student, and you protest on behalf of Hamas and the people of Gaza on the campus of George Washington University. And the U.S. government, this is, a block away from the State Department, 3 blocks away from the White House. And the U.S. government has its hand tied. They can't do anything to you because of our freedoms and our liberties. Now, let's just reverse this for a quick second. Let's say you're an American student, and you go to Egypt, and you're going to the University of Cairo, and you participate in a protest against the Egyptian government on behalf of the people of Israel. How's that going to turn out for you?
Yeah.
Where's your happy ending? And yet we are told that we can't do anything. So apparently 600 students at more than 90 colleges and universities right now have had their visas revoked or their legal status terminated in recent weeks. That's according to the Associated Press. Including a Georgetown University research student and faculty member named Dr. Badar Khan Suri, detained by federal officials in Arlington. As you know, we talked about that story. ACLU, of course, is trying to fight tooth and nail to keep all of these people here. It seems like a simple equation. If you come here from a foreign country and you're here on a student visa, there's a couple of things you have to do. Follow the law. Actually be a student and not overstay your student visa, which is something that happens all the time. And number 3, don't engage in protests, especially illegal. Everyone says, they were just protesting. Every single one of these protests was illegal. They set up camp on the campus. They prohibited Jewish students from crossing the quadrangle. Don't participate in illegal protests against our nation and against our allies and aligning yourself with a terrorist organization. Those seem like simple rules, but apparently people at college are too stupid to understand that.
Well, and American students encourage these foreign. I will say, I think that a lot of American students who might be part of these organizations encourage these foreign students to do this, and that is tragic because I think, sort of given their stamp of approval, many foreign students probably unwittingly engage in this kind of stuff.
Nah. I think, listen, if they're that stupid, good for them. They should go too. They're not learning anything in their college. And by the way, listen, I don't blame the American students for egging them on, because sometimes it's really hard to get rid of that one roommate in your dorm that is screwing it up for everybody else. Hey, Abdul, come to the protest. Oh, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It's 5:53. Cory Booker is going to lead a posse of Democrats to El Salvador to push for the release of that Maryland man, the MS-13 gang member, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I don't know how Trump does it.